very excited to be with you today, Narinder, and learn more about your background, learn a little bit more about LookDeep, as well as the work you're doing broadly with health systems and the results that you're seeing. So let's start with some introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I understand you're the co-founder and the CEO. So tell us how this idea came about and the work you've been doing.
Thanks so much, Sonia. Happy to be here. As you said, I'm Narinder Singh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LookDeep. My journey begins in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's where I was born and raised, and then made it to the coast during the dot-com revolution. And my first career was actually in technology. I worked for a company called Web Methods. Then I worked at SAP in corporate strategy in the CEO's office, focused on bringing new innovation to enterprises. And then I started a company called AVIA. We became Salesforce's first investment and really helped shape the cloud computing revolution. Grew that over 12 years to over $200 million and about 1,500 people, and got to work with some of the world's largest companies as they dealt with the disruption of cloud computing. And so then my story took a turn. We sold that company. I decided to go back to school, and I did a master's in translational medicine, classic medical devices. With me and a bunch of 20-somethings. I was a little bit older than that, but it was incredibly enlightening, and it gave me an appreciation for what's innovation look like inside of healthcare. And so from there, I had really a lot of exposure to what was happening in hospitals because I worked on alarm fatigue. That was my big project while I was there, using machine learning models to help deal with alarm fatigue. But my real education in acute care in hospitals came after that. My mom had interstitial lung disease, and she went in for a somewhat routine biopsy that went south. She developed ARDS when she was in the hospital, and she had to then, they said she couldn't come out. She had to qualify for a lung transplant, about battery of tests while she was intubated and unstable. And then eventually she qualified. Then she had to wait for a lung. She was on ECMO that takes over the function of your lung and heart. And then eventually she had a bilateral lung transplant, multiple infections. That was 7.5 years and 2 grandkids ago. So she's doing wonderfully, but it was touch and go. For 12 weeks, I spent 1,000 hours in the hospital at her bedside in the ICU, in the step-down unit, and then as we were kind of transitioning to home. And it gave me an incredible appreciation for the miracle of medicine. But I have to say, I was incredibly disappointed at how technology supported it. I thought it was terrible, to be honest. And I was like, this can be better. It can be so much better, and there's a way for us to change how we engage with this. But the even deeper realization I had was, I was like, why can't my favorite nurse, Meg, just be with my mom all the time? Because when Meg was there, she headed off problems before they became problems. Wow. And I really couldn't stop thinking about that, because my mom's case, it was a miracle. She was at UCSF. Everything had to go right. Any misstep, and my mom would have had a very different outcome. So I was like, why can't Meg be with my mom all the time? And then I started thinking about, why can't Meg be with everyone's mom all the time? So then we basically started the company LookDeep to use computer vision and AI to watch patients, to help nurses and doctors care for patients in the hospital. So we say we want to be ever present for every patient. We want to help nurses and doctors who today are in a room an hour or two out of their 12-hour shift, or 30 minutes a day for a doctor, help them be there even when they can't physically be there for every patient as they're going through these journeys that are really life-altering. So that's the story of the company and how we started.
Wow. Well, one, I'm glad your mom made it through what sounds like quite a harrowing experience. And I'm always so touched by when I hear founder stories of the problem they saw, and they say, we have to fix this, right? And it truly is. It's millions of people who probably go through a similar journey and need that special touch from a Meg, or somebody as a family member you can rely on. So tell us, from LookDeep's perspectives, I always start with why. So what are the problems you're solving, and why are these important?
Yep. And the key that we had in the hospital, but even after, is that we all start with saying, hey, this is about the patient. But our real insight was, how can we help nurses and doctors and therapists and other providers be there for the patient? So our core value proposition centered around using that computer vision and AI to watch the patient. But in some ways, we're doing it for the nurses and doctors so they can be there for the patients. And so our scenarios that we think about range from safety scenarios like virtual sitting, where people are trying to help people not fall, to virtual nursing, where nurses are stretched thin more than they've ever been before. And how can we give them a sense of safety that when they're there, they have all the right information. And when they're not there, there's someone watching for them. And so we think about those, but we really had a couple realizations when we came in. When we came in, even still, video is used in 5% of rooms, 10% of rooms, but there were a dozen solutions. So we focus on a platform that has those focus areas, but also virtual rounding, family connection, so families can visit with hospital control, a light EICU solution, virtual scribe enablement, virtual translators, really any inpatient scenario where video or continuous AI for observation can be helpful. We view this as an infrastructure that is there in every room for every patient and is there to support doctors and nurses. And that's the future that we're driving to with our solution.
And you hit on some key problems of, yes, we have to support, there's workforce shortages, there's workforce burnout, they are overwhelmed by all the different things that are going on in the inpatient floor. But another problem that you mentioned is there's so many little devices that are not always connected. So how do you create infrastructure? So tell us, how is LookDeep doing this? What is your solution really do to solve some of these problems?
So we think about three parts of the solution: the AI, the hardware, and the software.
Okay.
As I mentioned at the beginning, the core problem of LookDeep was around computer vision that could see and understand the patient, right?
That's the LookDeep piece. Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Great. Yeah.
And so we think about the AI as watching the patient, even if they're just lying in the bed. It's like having a wearable without having a wearable. But then we can also see if they're getting out of bed. Were they restless at night? Are they less mobile than they were yesterday? Is their mobility changing at different points? So all of these data points is the idea of, it's like you're having somebody sit in the room all the time. So every time you change a medication or have a difference in how the patient is dealing with the treatment, you know the context of what's happening. So that AI starts with things like safety. So for example, for virtual sitting, the AI automatically detects what's a safe area and an unsafe area for the patient to be in. But then we realize that it's not just about AI. AI here has to be driver assist, not full self-driving. So our model is solutions that help clinical staff use AI to extend their reach. So for falls, for example, we create that safety zone, but the virtual sitter or observer can change it, move it around the chair, make it bigger or smaller. But then the AI is watching all the time. And we're nudging you to say, hey, here's what's happening. Or we're watching everyone and only bringing the ones that need human attention to you. So that's an example of how AI is assisting a virtual observer. Similar.
Does it get to the alarm fatigue piece as well that we started with in the beginning? Because sometimes too much technology can exacerbate that alarm fatigue, right?
Exactly. And so that's why, like, what we don't do is every time the alarm goes off, page the nurse and say, run to the room.
Yeah.
Right. But if we're basically coloring a block on your screen that you're already watching anyways, or popping up a new box and saying, pay attention to this one. And now as a virtual observer, that's a very light load. That's your actual job. And then when you hit alarm, if you can't talk the patient into being more safe, now the bedside nurse knows 100%, this is an alarm where one of my colleagues says, I need to be here. So it gives better trust in the system overall.
Yeah.
And then if you think about it for nurses, like I said, you're not there all the time. And so what if you've got a patient that is not moving, hasn't been turned for a couple of hours, and now you know. And so you can, as the virtual nurse, say, hey, we got to go send a PCA to turn them. Or let me check the medications. It looks like the LookDeep is showing their movements really declined the last 6 hours. Did we have a medication change? So we're not taking over the decision. We're prompting a virtual observer, virtual sitter, virtual nurse with information they can use to talk to the bedside team more effectively. So that means the bedside team is getting perfect information. The virtual observer, virtual nurse, virtual sitter is getting an AI assist so that they know they're paying attention to the right patients at the right time.
Right. So it's making them smarter, more efficient, versus adding to the burden. I think that is a big shift in healthcare right now. Technology has unfortunately added to the burden of clinicians for so many years. And I think what it should do, as you're describing, is assist, make me smarter, make me more efficient, make me faster.
Yeah, we should not add to the net clicks you have to make in a day. We should be taking away from those, right? And that's really kind of fundamental for us. The other thing that's fundamental is hospitals are diverse and you need to be able to work in lots of environments. So for example, we're the only company on the market that we can actually provide our own hardware. So I'm holding it up in front of my face right now, right?
Okay, so that is what is installed in the rooms?
That can be installed in the rooms, 2 cameras, night vision, audio, etc. But we also can work with hardware you already have. So if you already have hardware, we just put in something that looks a lot more like this
Yeah.
into your plugs into your existing hardware. And so basically it's a small device that's just the AI engine. So that means that whether you've got a 300-bed brand new hospital that's got a camera in every room, we can work there. Or if you need to get a solution into your rural hospitals in 3 days, we can send you the devices to put them in the room immediately. So that flexibility and that diversity is important for hospitals today as they try to undertake this journey that is going to have different environments at the different hospitals that are under their purview.
Yeah, and it's not easy for retrofitting an existing functioning hospital to do this while patients are on the floor as well. So all of that has to be a big consideration. So you mentioned 3 pieces: AI, hardware, and software.
And then the software piece is I mentioned all the scenarios. I think, I came from enterprise software, as I mentioned, Salesforce, Google Enterprise, Workday. So we, already are kind of the most flexible you can have. We know that you've got many hospitals. The rules, the workflows could be different at your hospitals. It could be different on a single unit. Some of your hospitals may have employed staff. Some of them could have contracted staff. So we can support every security permutation, and it's a platform so that when tomorrow's video scenario comes, where you're like, I want to do this with video. I want to, for example, something we're introducing is around helping workplace safety for nurses. We can take our same platform with 3 clicks, enable it for that scenario so that now the person watching is the nurse's station or even the security if there's a room that there's a concern about the nurse's safety at any given point. So this ability to make software flexible that can change and evolve without having to have a 6-month or a 12-month release cycle is critical to innovation in any emerging area. And that's a new muscle for hospitals that we're trying to help them develop.
That is true. And of course, every hospital always asks, how well does it integrate with the EHRs? As I'm assuming you've done that with some of the big EHRs already.
Absolutely. We walk in day one and Active Directory for security, EHR for ADT feed or pushing messages in, Epic or Cerner is kind of the most common ones we've worked with, and nurse call system. Because we don't want to add another alarm. We want to use systems where you have them. But even more things like the button on the wall, like you can say, hey, LookDeep, get help, or you can hit the button on the wall that you're used to hitting for years and years for getting ICU help. So we'll integrate with last mile technology so that we can fit into a variety of environments and be able to take over functions, but also play nice with others. What we think is very important is there's no one vendor that's going to do everything for you. And so you have to have an integration first mindset. We learn this in every single other industry. Healthcare is the one industry that's been a little slow and sometimes thinks that it can put everything into one solution. I will assure you, history has showed that that's not the case. You need open platforms, and even in healthcare, even in hospitals, that's going to become more and more important for their success in adopting technology that can really make a real difference.
That's a really important insight, and I think that's a new muscle also for many health systems as they think about their tech stack and infrastructure. Now, I think you started talking about this, and I see a really nice table on your website of how you differentiate. But tell us in your words, knowing that this is a space, whether you call it smart room, whether you call it, hospital of the future, virtual nursing, this space is a number of companies. So how would you say your solution is different from the others in the market right now?
One, I love that question. I love answering that question. And you shouldn't believe anything I say or anybody in my seat says. You should prove it, number one. How do you prove it? So first of all, for example, on the AI side, we've presented at peer-reviewed conferences. We're sharing and open with what we're doing. And it doesn't mean that we're perfect, but it means that we're pushing the envelope that transparency is critical. You can't just have a pretty demo with a video in it. I saw a demo one time where somebody showed a patient and they said, patient going to the restroom. And I immediately said, that's BS. That's not real. They just created a video because no AI can tell by looking at you if you're about to go to the restroom or not. They can tell you're getting out of bed. They might be able to tell when you were probably going to the restroom, but they can't do that. And so you see that, and it makes me think that should reduce credibility for the overall claims of the solution. So peer-reviewed presentations, things in our AI you can actually see and touch and use today, not in phase 2, not in phase 3, today. The second, I think, is architecture. When I see vendors say you can host our solution or it can run in the cloud, I think that's either a consulting toolkit or you don't understand technology. Because our AI occurs at the edge. Our device that I was showing, that runs at the edge so we can be secure, but the solution runs in cloud. And basically, if that's for us fundamental, not because we're stubborn, because we've seen what innovation needs to happen. In every other industry, cloud-based solutions allow the customer to adopt innovation faster. So that would be a huge differentiator for us. I would say if your IT department insists on having something on premise, you might want to think about, is your IT department equipped for what's coming for hospitals in the future? Because we've seen this happen in 20 other industries. Your IT department should be focused on what your clinical team needs, not on architectural legacies that have been part of the way we've already done it. So those are things that I think we take an opinion on and have real differentiation on. The last thing I would say would be business alignment. I think the world of 3-year and 5-year contracts, AI is changing too quickly for hospitals to sign those for anybody, including with us. So we monthly or annual, if you want it, it's consumption based, no upfront costs. It's we succeed when you succeed. Our technology can work perfectly, but if you're not getting value out of it, you're not going to use it more, and we're not going to grow with you. So we care about your problems. It's not just is the video and AI working, is like, why isn't adoption happening? What can we do? What's training there? We are incented to care about what you care about. And I think that should be something every hospital expects from their vendors, and their contracts and their structures should expect that. So you light a fire under everybody. And so we look at those as fundamental of what we're trying to do, and hospitals should hold us and everyone accountable to similar components and capabilities.
I love that. I really like how you articulated all of this. You are coming in with a point of view from outside industry as well, of just the technology architecture requirements, your peer-reviewed AI, and then the business alignment piece. Tell us a little bit about KPIs, metrics, results that you're seeing at your existing customers.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it back to there, because ultimately, I'm going to bring it back to where I started. Like for me, this is not an academic exercise. When I see patients, I think about my mom's situation. I still remember to this day that the alarm pattern for the SpO2 cuff slipping off your finger and the trach slipping out of your neck sounds exactly the same, and it's 95% false because it doesn't mean anything. So my mom, in six times in 12 weeks, her trach slipped out. And as I put it back in, I used to think, is this going to be a time it's going to take a minute or 14 minutes for the staff to come? Not because they're doing anything wrong, but because those alarms are so frequent and so not relevant.
They can't tell, what is real and what's not.
So ultimately, all this tech, all these clinical pieces come back to how do we make sure that we allow nurses and doctors to care for patients well? So coming to your point on questions of KPIs, yes, our Gen 1 KPIs are solution-driven, where for our virtual falls piece, we can have metrics that show we reduce falls by 90%. We can have metrics that show that we reduce staff time in the room for false reasons. We can have metrics that show we save hospitals money within 3 months. We can have metrics that show that our AI is enabling 3, 4, 5, up to 10 times more patients to be monitored. And that's where I want to shift this for a second. Virtual sitting, for example, has been around for 10 years. Every vendor claims great metrics, but the national fall rate hasn't changed. So we have to acknowledge as an industry what we're doing is not working, right? And why is that? I believe what people are saying, but they're watching too few patients because it's too expensive. Half the hospital's high risk for falls, they're watching 3% of patients. And that's why they can produce great metrics, but we're doing nothing to help overall. So when we look at metrics, for example, we're looking at today in some of the rural hospitals we're working with, we're monitoring 50% of patients because we can do it cost effectively. And now we're seeing the fall rate for the hospital drop because we're watching every high-risk patient. So that's an example of taking tactical metrics that people have gotten used to and turning them into strategic ones. And our next set of metrics we care about is we're starting to get to where we're installed in every room in the hospital, and they're doing virtual sitting for falls, virtual nursing for better throughput, for nurse retention, virtual rounding, family connects for better HCAP scores. So we're starting to see all of those happening. And yes, it's interesting to measure those, but what we really want to measure is say, hey, we kept the cost of care the same and we improved all these outcomes, or we even reduced the cost of care and we kept the same outcomes. That is top-down strategic metrics that we need to get to as an industry. Only then can we, I think, really be proud of what we're doing, because we're changing the shape of care. If you look at US population, 50% increase in those over 65. Staffing is flat or diminishing. We are
Yeah.
boiling the frog on patient safety in hospitals. So if we can't deal with innovation that creates efficiency and scale, we're going to continue to fail patients a little bit every year. And so that's really the metric we ultimately care about, is bending the cost curve of care.
I love that. And thank you for really pushing the thinking, because you're right. It's so often easy to claim some metrics and feel good and pat ourselves on the back about it. But you're saying, let's think about the bigger picture and really move the needle in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. We care about the metrics. We want every patient to be safer. So I'm not trying to dismiss that these initiatives were bad, but ultimately the purpose is to prevent falls in hospitals. That's our metric, not did we do it on the 2% of patients that we used to monitor. How do we do it for every patient? Be ever present for every patient is something that we really try to live by.
I appreciate that. And this has been a great conversation. Any closing thoughts or words of anything you have coming up or anything you'd like to share before we close our time together?
I think the two things I will say is that I welcome this kind of spirit of innovation and competition, because we want competition to drive better solutions for hospitals.
Absolutely.
And so it's one of these things, like I think the one thing that really resonates with me in the industry is there's many folks that we compete with, but I can sense in many of them that they care about the same thing, which is the patient. And so I think that accountability to make sure that partners who are sitting in the seats I am are of that to me is first order for hospitals, to make sure you have that kind of relationship with whoever you're using, so you're driving real systemic change. In terms of new things that we're coming out with, I mentioned the capability around Infinity Watch, which is the industry's first ability to, have one person watch 30, 40, 50, 100 patients. We are going to have a publication that shows the normative data around patient behavior that we use to construct that, and we'll share that openly. We're also starting to really think about how do we make nurses the front line of solutions of AI. Right now, there's a lot of controversy where nurses are sometimes, without even understanding fully, upset about AI, and kind of rightfully so, because they're afraid this is just going to be more work without real help. So we're looking at how do we change that. So for example, we'll be introducing a new capability that is similar to what we're doing with Infinity Watch for nurse safety in the hospital. So we can watch any situation that might be potentially putting unsafe situations for nurses, bringing that about. So those are just two of the things that we're looking at. And the third thing I will say is a bunch of integration with ambient technologies from vendors like the household names that we list often, Oracle, Microsoft, Gemini from Google, OpenAI. Integration into the long tail of AI excitement is something that's first order in our product, and we're excited to showcase more of that in the coming months.
It sounds like you have lots of exciting things coming up. Well, if you want to learn more about LookDeep, come to AVIA Marketplace and learn more about from their profile. I'm sure Narinder, your team will be posting a lot more of this content, of things you've shared on Marketplace. Otherwise, reach out directly to the team at LookDeep. Thanks again for the conversation. Really, really interesting.
Send me an email at ceo@lookdeep.health or LookDeep AI, and I'm happy to get back to you personally. Thank you, Sonia, so much for setting this up, and I loved your questions. I appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, take care.